If I asked you to name some of the most important places in jazz history, what would you pick? Maybe New Orleans, maybe New York City. But what if I told you there was an important piece of jazz history hidden right here in Northern Ontario? On the other side of this door is one of the most interesting groups of musicians that you may have never heard of. Some of the members have been playing together since the 1940s. Welcome to Gore Bay, Ontario. This is the Manitoulin Swing Band. The story of the Manitoulin Swing Band begins with a crisis during a blizzard in 1947. I'll tell you that story in just a moment, but first I want to tell you about the people who made it happen. In particular, Bob Wiseman and Doug Smith. In 1948, they helped to relaunch a band that they are still playing with more than 75 years later.
Hi, I'm Doug Smith. I've been playing with the Gore Bay Orchestra and the Manitoulin Swing Band for a lot of years.
Doug and Bob are both from Gore Bay, which has a long musical history. At one point, it was the place to be around here if you wanted to hear jazz. Since the town's early days, some of its best musicians have played together in an informal band, the Gore Bay Orchestra. They'd play for parties, weddings, and dances. The early history of the band is pretty fuzzy, but it probably started up in the 1890s, just after the town was founded. The Gore Bay Orchestra was not a constant thing. The band was off and on as some players joined and others left. The list of people who have played with the band is quite long, and I wouldn't do it justice trying to name them all in this video. However, I am building a list in the description, so please leave a comment if there is a name that I'm missing. One version of the band played together from the 20s to the 1930s. The main organizer in those years was Tom Porter. He's the one sitting at the drums on the right-hand side. One of the other members around that time was a piano player named Rita Burns, later Rita Smith. She played with the Gore Bay Orchestra until 1933, which was around the time she gave birth to her son, Doug. Yes, that Doug. His whole family was pretty musical, from his parents to his grandparents. In fact, Doug's grandfather, Fred Smith, played clarinet with the Gore Bay Orchestra several years earlier. Despite his musical family, Doug didn't really know about the Gore Bay Orchestra, or even about jazz. When he was still a boy, the Second World War broke out, and the band didn't play around those years. It wasn't until 1945 that Doug got his first taste of the music that would come to define his life. The war was finally over, and his neighbors threw a party to celebrate the hard-fought victory over the Nazis. The neighbor's house was full of musicians, including Doug's dad, who played drums and brought his son along to witness this history. The musicians took turns playing and trading off their instruments, and they played swing tunes that Doug had never heard before. As it turned out, some of the people at that party used to play with the Gore Bay Orchestra before it broke up. Knowing about jazz and being able to play it are two very different things. But less than 2 years after that post-war party, Doug would get a crash course. It all happened on a snowy night in 1947. It was time for the annual Gore Bay Sailors' Ball. This was a celebration for the people who worked on the Great Lakes when the shipping season closed for the winter. By this time, the Gore Bay Orchestra was still disbanded. There was a band from Wiseman that was supposed to play at the dance, but a blizzard sprang up and it closed the roads right across Manitoulin. The organizers of the dance, Tom Porter and George Purvis Sr., were in a tough spot. A party like the Sailors' Ball needed live music. Vinyl records were still in their early days and not very common, especially in a place like Northern Ontario. And besides, there is no match for a live band at a dance party. Tom and George did the only thing they could think of that might save their night. They went out into the snow and started knocking on doors all over town. Eventually, they found enough people to cobble together a band. Doug Smith on cornet was the youngest at 14 years old. But there was a problem. None of these musicians had ever really played together, and for some of them, they'd never even played jazz before. But they were quite literally the only band in town. So when 11 o'clock came, they took to the stage, and they did the best they could.
But the sailor's ball, everybody was tight, so you could play it over and over again and nobody would notice that you were playing the same songs.
That's an old-timey slang, everybody was tight. What do you mean by that?
There was a lot of drinking going on in those days.
The hall was packed. Doug figures about 600 people had come to the Sailors' Ball. Maybe it was the band's enthusiasm. Maybe it was sympathy that they were doing the best they could on such short notice. Maybe it was because the audience was tight, as Doug likes to say. Whatever it was, they were a hit. And nobody seemed to mind that they played the same 10 songs over and over until about 3 in the morning.
We gave it all we could. My mother was concerned that I was only 14 years old and I shouldn't be going to play in the dances because she'd played in the dances before and there'd been a lot of bad actors. So away I went and we performed that night.
That show brought out Doug's deep passion for music. The next year, 1948, he and his friend Bob Wiseman helped to relaunch the Gore Bay Orchestra. The main organizer was Ma Lloyd, who played piano, and they were also joined by Virginia Smith on violin. Amazingly, as I filmed this in the mid-2020s, Doug and Bob are still playing jazz together in the same band that they started almost 80 years ago. Our story will continue in about 25 seconds, but I want to take a moment to thank the people who have supported my passion project, the Living History series. If you enjoy the work I do, please consider making a donation on my Ko-fi page. It's linked in the description. I want to give a special thanks to these supporters who have helped make my series possible. You can also help me for free by liking, commenting, and sharing, or by sending me story ideas for future projects. Now, let's get back to the swing band. The Gore Bay Orchestra played for dances right across the island, from Gore Bay and Kagawong to Mindamoya and Sandfield. They played as many as 4 nights a week during wedding season. Sometimes that meant getting home at 4 in the morning and being to work for 8.
Well, we were younger and had more stamina. We nearly killed one another.
During those peak years, some other familiar faces joined the band. An alto sax player named Oliver Runnels joined up in 1958, and in 1962, Jim Smith joined on tenor sax. They're both still a part of this band in the present day, and Jim's wife Joanne has also joined the group. Even though some of the original 1948 lineup is still intact, there have been some big changes for this band over the years. Doug moved down to Toronto for a few years in his 20s, and the band had to keep going without him until he returned. Bob Wiseman left for a career in Sudbury, and he never moved back. However, he still drove for hours to make it to gigs and practices in Gore Bay. In 1965, founding member Ma Lloyd moved away, and the full orchestra went on hiatus for a few years. The band members kept playing on their own in small groups, but they didn't reunite under the Gore Bay Orchestra banner until a few years later. And they also had to learn how to play by ear because their old sheet music was starting to fall apart. The relaunch brought in new faces like Nick Hines on piano, but the group's passion for music was as strong as ever.
We just had such a good time doing what we did that everyone around us had a good time as well. And we didn't play terrifically difficult music, but it was lots of fun.
By that time, most of the members of the Gore Bay Orchestra weren't even living in Gore Bay. At some point, the group changed its name to the Manitoulin Swing Band to better reflect the membership. In recent years, some younger faces have joined the mix, and they're actually based in Gore Bay. Paul Best has joined on bass, Wayne Bryant plays drums, and Heather Bryant sings for the occasional tune.
We've also blended in music from the 50s and 60s, so that it's a little more up to date. I say often that we play some old music and some very old music.
The Manitoulin Swing Band has always been a passion project. Even Tom Porter's books from the 1920s show that the band was losing money on gigs. But it's never been about profits or showing off. These players have always focused on doing what they love and sharing that with the people of Manitoulin Island. Now, in the mid-2020s, the band is facing a tough challenge. The fact is, its two founding members are now in their 90s. In the case of Bob Wiseman, he's still living in Sudbury, and it's getting tough for him to come all the way out for practices or gigs. Doug Smith still loves to play, but sometimes his health gets in the way. Sure, future generations could keep this band going indefinitely, but finding those people is easier said than done. And plus, they'll never have quite the same connection to this music as the ones who grew up with it. But there are glimmers of hope that this musical tradition might continue. Teenager Ellie Maxwell lives on Manitoulin Island, and she sings jazz standards just like the crooners of a century ago.
Fairy tales can come true, it can happen to you.
In fact, Doug would have probably played some of those same songs when he was her age. For Doug Smith, the fact that he's been playing in the same band for almost 80 years is nothing short of a miracle. Did you ever imagine that the band would be playing together for this long?
No. That would seem impossible to be playing from 1947 to 2025. Yet it is.
Getting to know these musicians has been one of the great highlights of my life. It's rare enough to meet people that grew up in the jazz age, let alone to get to connect with the ones who are keeping it around as part of Canada's living history. Now, if you don't mind, I think they're calling my tune. Thanks so much for watching. I want to give a special thanks to all the band members who helped me with interviews, photos, and sharing their history, especially Doug Smith. Special thanks also to Annie Porter. Please share this video and consider donating to my Ko-fi page. And now, I'm going to let myself and the Manitoulin Swing Band play me out. Until next time, be well. Thank you, everyone.